For the past 2 years, Jocko Fuel has been the only supplement I've consumed. It's helped me stay in shape now that my competitive career is finished. If you've been waiting to try Jocko, the wait is over. Jocko has now teamed with Walmart, bringing clean fuel to the entire nation. Jocko Fuel is loaded with all the good stuff and none of the bad. And I'm talking no added sugars, no artificial sweeteners, and absolutely no gray area or banned substances. Just pure, clean fuel to power your performances. Jocko Fuel is now available in Walmart nationwide. Products available at your local Walmart are Jocko Malt, ready to drink, Jocko Malt powder, and Jocko pre-workout. How convenient. Guys, the time is now. Consider trying some of my favorites like Jocko Go and Jocko Hydrate. You can even do it online. Use code Chael30 at JockoFuel.com or just stop by your local Walmart and get your hands on some Jocko ASAP. Don't wait, might not last. Fuel up with Jocko Fuel and crush your goals. Now there's no excuse for not having clean fuel. Guys, I want you to go get Jocko Fuel today at Walmart. Jones, Aspinall, do we want it? Of course. Now, is that the biggest fight in heavyweight history? Now, that bar, before you have to go rack your brain, that bar isn't quite as high as you might think. For example, and I don't know this to be true, but Jones versus Stipe might be the biggest fight in heavyweight history. I'm not telling you that it is. I'm sharing it might be. There haven't been colossal fights in that weight class in the new era. And it's very important that you take that into perspective. Like Muhammad Ali, for example, while many people will say is the best. More people that weren't alive and have never seen Muhammad Ali fight will claim in social settings that he was the best than any other boxer, but he has no records. None. No live gate, no pay-per-view, no merchandise. But if you look a little bit closer, it's not because those weren't sought after and anticipated. Pay-per-view didn't exist. That wasn't a thing. If you wanted to watch somebody box back then, you had two options. Be in the arena or hover around a transistor radio. That's how you took these fights in. It's one of the reasons that the champions back then were champions for so long. They would go 10 years unbeaten. Their opponents in competition, scouting, it wasn't a thing. You couldn't break a guy down. It wasn't a thing. All right, so I'm just bringing to your perspective that the bar is not overly high. If it becomes the biggest fight in heavyweight history, which I believe that it will, but just so you know, I want to ask you a follow-up question. Is it the biggest fight in UFC history? Now, that's the one that matters. And I just want you to ponder it. It's a big fight. It's definitely the one that we want to see. It's definitely the one that we want to see right now. But that's somewhat of a new phenomenon. I mean, a year isn't that long, guys. Can we agree? Can we agree that 1 year, boy, it sounds like a long time, but it sure goes by fast. Okay. Because 1 year ago, November of last year, the sought-after fight was Sergey Pavlovich versus Jon Jones. That was the big one. That was the one that was so good, you couldn't believe it was true. It was so good that you started taunting Jon Jones and saying, he'll never do it. He'll never do it as a way of getting him to do it, just like on the playground. But that was still the one. And that wasn't the one for very long. Because 4 months before that, it was Francis Ngannou versus Jon Jones. So if you can remember those time frames, try to be real objective and answer the question. Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall right now, is that a bigger fight than Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou back when you wanted that? And try to answer that. Because history will always repeat itself. And I think that we do understand, as much as we want Tom and Jon, and as much as that's the one where there are elements that are going to be brought to that contest that we believe could overcome Jon. Those were the same elements that were supposed to be brought to the contest when it was going to be Francis and Jon, and both guys were under contract at the same time. And the fight wasn't made. And when the fight wasn't made, And time went on and history went on and all the ideas about how much the UFC needs it and they must do it. All these ideas, you look back and go, well, no, we haven't missed a beat. It's been really great. As a matter of fact, based on the outcome of that, maybe we wouldn't even have this love of Jon and Tom, right? You go in different directions. It doesn't lessen the strength or the will or desire to see it. It just shifts and goes into something else. And I'm only bringing that to you. There's talk that a negotiation is going to take place. And go ahead. Do whatever it is that you do. I would be curious what there is to talk about. I feel like I'd be a great middleman on that, great arbitrator. Because any question that you might have, I believe without even going to the other side, I could answer for you. I could save you a lot of time. For example, if we're getting down to the nuts and bolts, what does this pay? That'd be very easy for me to answer. Grab your contract and I'll open it up and I'll show you what your participation is. I could even go further and give you some projections in this whole biggest fight ever. I could kind of talk to you about that. Then I could show you what's called thresholds. You're not likely to know what that term means. It's not likely a term that you've ever come across, but I know, and I'll explain it to you. And we could come down to the weight class. No weight class, that'll be an easy one for me to answer. I could even call President Mike Mazzulli and just say in the unified rules, what is the weight limit for heavy? Maybe you want to know the rules themselves. Again, while I'm on the phone with Mike Mazzulli, we could just ask that and get all of that cleared up. What is it we need to talk about? Are we talking about dates? Are we talking about time? Are we talking about venue? I mean, we don't own venues all over the world. We've got to play the venue game like anybody else. But we do happen to know a date we would like to do. Does that matter? If I tell you the fight's going to be in LA and then it ends up being in Salt Lake, does that matter? Do we lose the deal over it? If I tell you we're going to do it in the US and it ends up I got to take it to Fight Island, does it matter? Does getting on that airplane and having somebody else take you there and put you in a car driven by somebody else and check you into a room that somebody else made the bed, like does it matter? I'm only asking now, maybe that's relevant, but if it doesn't, what is it that you feel we have to talk about? What is it that is unknown? And I brought you the story of Muhammad Ali because herein lies the bigger problem that isn't being discussed by anybody, okay? Jon just did this. And Jon stood on what he believed was principle. And that's fine. But when it was over, it was a game that he lost. I don't think anybody believes, including Jon, that he's going to do 10 more fights. Is that a reasonable thing for me to say? Jon's not going to do 10 more fights? Because 4 years ago, when he dropped the belt and left the sport, 4 years ago, at 3 fights per year, right now, today, had he followed the normal schedule, he would have had 12, which we know he's not going to do. Do you understand my point? My point is, it's all behind him and done. The legacy done, secured. The days of driving to the gym, the money going to the account, it would all already be there. It would be done. Maybe that's not a positive. But I'm sharing it for you because when Jon dropped that belt and left over a contract negotiation, it wasn't as though Jon wasn't willing to give something. That part of the story gets left out. Yeah, Jon wanted something. That's true. He had his hand out. But Jon was willing to give something back, which is, I will take on a larger risk. These arenas I fight in keep having thousands of people showing up dressed as empty seats. Because I've gotten so good, you're failing, to create an idea in the audience's mind that I might lose. So I will take a bigger risk and spot the other guy some pounds. This was the story. But it also happened. The renegotiation happened. Now, since the renegotiation, you got thrown a fish called Surreal Gone, and then you had a fight against a 40-plus-year-old man in Stipe. That's just the truth. That's what happened. And now, you want to sit down and renegotiate. We just did that. You sat for 3 years. You came in, renegotiated. We just did that. Now, guys, don't forget. Okay, here's the problem. Jon doesn't know the business. It's as simple as that. When Jon came back, he had his new contract negotiated by somebody who doesn't know the business. That's just the truth. So now here you are 2 fights later, Jon's wanting to renegotiate because the new deal that he signed, it never should have been done. There's the truth. So when I tell you that Muhammad Ali doesn't have any records, but I also explained to you why. Or when Netflix comes out and makes it clear that a non-boxer versus a retired boxer brought in more boxing eyeballs than anything in history, there's a reason why. It's not as though that belt or that storyline or those two competing, or you can go grab any geriatric and put him with any guy that had a YouTube presence. That's not necessarily what happened here. You have it on a platform who was able to host and bring it to a whole bunch of people. It's a different business. Those 3 years that Jon said, it's a different business. So now here you are 2 fights later, if you want to call him that. I mean, look, in all fairness, nobody knew that Surreal was going to flick it before that fight, and nobody understood that Stipe was only human and at 40 plus years old taking 3 years off. Like, everything was very clear in hindsight. But now that we do have hindsight, it would appear for those good experiences I had, I owe you a bit of a thank you. But that's not where we're at. We're at a let's sit down and renegotiate what we already renegotiated. Oh, and by the way, we just did it. And you gave me 2 lops in the meanwhile. The problem is, if I go out and I do it your way, and I make some big, beautiful thing for this one and only big fight that you have, how do I get it back? I could take a risk and make an investment up front, but your words are accurate. This is the one. And the key on that is one. So whatever you get here, it's not as though the next one's going to be smaller and you're going to understand that. And so then I can adjust and come down. You're not going to do that. You're going to want to stay the same and escalate the same as every other person that's ever been in the UFC since 1993. So if we're not going to get anywhere, and we know we're not going to get anywhere, and the business has changed, and you've got the contract that you asked for because you brought in somebody from the boxing background that didn't understand the shift, the complete and utter shift in the pay-per-view model, what is it that we possibly have to talk about?